Hi everyone, so my name is Nikhil. So in this tutorial, we will show you that how to create the API routes with the Next.js version 13. So in the Next.js version 13, the app router is now stable. So we can create the production ready applications with the Next.js 13 with the app router. So in this video, we will create a basic CRUD API with the Next.js 13 app router. So we'll only be creating the API part and not the front end. And for testing that API, we'll be using the Postman. So without wasting much time, so let's get started. So after this video, you will have the solid understanding of how to create the API routes with the Next.js 13 app router. So without wasting much time, so let's get started. So we need to copy this command for that. So we can just copy that from here and then we can just move on. And then we can just paste that command over here. We have the npx create next app at the latest. So we can just hit enter and then it will ask you for a couple of questions as well. So what's your project name? So we can keep it default as the my app. And then you can see, would you like to use the TypeScript? So yes, we'll be using the TypeScript for this. So we can hit on yes. We have the, would you like to use the ESLint as well? So we'll be using the yes. Again, tailwind for the yes. We have the source directory. So we won't be using the source because we'll be using the app directory over here. We have the app router. Yes, the most important one. And would you like to customize the default import? So we can click on the no. So after a couple of seconds, it will install all of the dependencies which are required for creating the brand new Next.js 13 application. So let's wait for a couple of seconds to implement that. So the Next.js 13 application is ready. And now we need to move on into the folder. So we have the CRUD API. And then we have the app folder, which is the routing folder of our application. So we have the app router. So inside that, you can see we have a couple of files. So we have the layout, which is the root layout of our application. And then we have the page, which is the custom UI for a specific route. So if you make a request to localhost port of the 3000, because the development server would open on the 3000. So if you make a request to localhost port of the 3000, then this page UI would be get reflected inside that request. So this page would be then handling that type of localhost port of the 3000 request because this is a custom UI for a specific route. So the page is a UI, and for creating the routes, the route folder have the route.ts file, which is a custom request handler for an API request. So if you want to learn more about that, then you can move on and then you can just learn about the Next.js app router. So you can have the Next.js app router, and inside that you can have a couple of things. So you can see building your application with that, and then you can have a lot of things over here. So we can have the routing over here, and inside that you can learn everything according to that. So you can say you can learn about here the file conventions as well, which is the most important part. Like what are the files which are supported inside the Next.js 13 app. So you can see for creating a custom UI. So a page is a UI unique to our route. And then you can see if you want to create the API request, then you can move on. You can create the route.js file in which it allows you to create a custom request handlers for a given particular route. So suppose if you want to make a route, so what I will do here, so we can just create a new folder that can be the API, and inside that we can create a route. So what we can do here, we can create another folder of the blocks like thing. So we can have the blocks, and inside that we can create the route.ts file. So we can have the route.ts file. So now this route.ts will be handling the request which is made to API/blocks. So this route.ts will handle the custom request which made to this route. Like we can have the get request as well, we can have the post as well. So you can see everything about that here. So all of the HTTP methods are supported here as well. Suppose the get, post, put, patch, delete. Like suppose you want to have a get function over here, you have the get request. So you can have a custom function for the get. So then you will be having the get function over there, which will handle this incoming request. You can have the post as well. You can have the put as well. You can have the delete as well. You can have the patch as well. So let's move on and let's just create a basic request over here. So if you want to make a request to the localhost 3000/API/blocks inside this route file, if you want to make a get request, then we can have the function, we can have the export, we can have the const, we can have the get. So the naming should be same, and that should be equals to an asynchronous arrow function. We can have the parameters of the request, and the type should be the request itself. So we can have the type of the request like this. So we can have the type of the request, and this is an extended version of the request of the web request API. So Next.js has extended that, and it has enabled the Next.js functionalities as well inside this request. And now let's just move on. We can have the response as well if we want to send some response. So we can have the response, and that should be again the response namespace from there. So we have the response and the request. And now you can see now it should work fine. And if we just log there, so we can have the log statement as well, like we can have the get request like this. So we can have the log. So now let's open the development server. So we can have the cd into the my app. And then we can just open the development server with the npm run dev. And now for testing the APIs, so for testing the UI, we can just test the UI directly on the web browser. But for testing the API, so we need a software which can test that API. So we need to install the Postman. So Postman is an API testing platform that is used to test the REST API or the GraphQL APIs. So let's move on. So I already have installed the Postman, so you should also install it. And then let's come back later. So you can see if you want to make a GET request to this particular route, so let's move on. So the request can be, we can have the HTTP, localhost, we can have the HTTP, we can have the localhost, the port of the 5000 and slash, we can have the API because we have the folder of the API. So each folder is a route. So we have the API and then we have the blocks. So we can have the blocks as well. So we have the HTTP localhost port of the 5000. So I think that should be the localhost port of the 3000, not the 5000. So API blocks. So if we just click on the send, so you can see inside the console window, you will get the console message, which is a GET request. So you can see now we are seeing the GET request over here and it is working perfectly fine. So same, you can have the post request as well. So you can just copy that over here. You can just copy and paste. You can have the post over here. So here you have the post and inside that you can have the post as well. You can have the post. And with that, if you make a post request over here, if you will just click on the send, then you can see now you are seeing the post request over here and everything seems to be working perfectly fine. So you can see now we have the static route file over here. So here we have the static route.ts file. But what if we want a dynamic route? So what if you can see we have the blocks and if you want to fetch a particular block, then we want to send the ID as well, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So then how will we accessing that? So for that, we need to create the dynamic route as well. So for creating the dynamic route, again, we need to have here the blocks and inside the blocks, now what can we do? So we can just create another folder that can be the dynamic folder with the square brackets and the ID within that. So with that, we can have the dynamic folder over here. And inside that folder, we can again create the route.ts file, which will handle that incoming request to this dynamic ID. So that will be the approach and that is supported inside the Next.js 13 app router. So now inside that, if you want to accept any request, like again, we can have a function of the get, we can have the export const, we can have the get over here, and that should be an async arrow function. We can have the request and the type should be the request itself. So request type should be there. And now if you want to just log something, like you want to log something, like you want to log the get, and if we just save and if we move on to the application, and if we want to just send the request of the localhost port of the 3000 API blocks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then you can see this log message would be then appearing with the dynamic ID. So you can see you are making the request to the dynamic ID, which is the blocks, which is slash blocks, slash any ID after that, that can be any dynamic ID. So this route is handling that part of request. So that's how it works. So that's how we create the APIs with the Next.js 13 app router. So now you can see now we have a couple of files over here. So you can see we have the route files, we have the blocks files. So you can see inside this dynamic ID file, now we'll be having a couple of functions. So the functions that we'll be having inside this will be the get request, in which we can just get a post by its ID. We can have the get a post by its ID. And then we can have another function over here that can be, I think that should be the put, in which what we'll be having, in which we'll be updating a post. So we can have the update post by its ID. And then we can have another function over here. So we can have the delete function over here, in which we'll be having the delete HTTP request, in which we'll delete the record. So we can have the update, we can have the delete over here, and that's how it will work here as well. So you can see here we'll be having the 3 handler functions, the get, put, and the delete for handling all of the requests. And here you can see inside the main route, we have the get and the post. So that's how it will work. So now what do we want to do as the next step? So here you can see now we don't have the real database to insert some data. So we don't have the real database. So instead, for creating the CRUD API, we can just use the static data over here. So inside the my app, now I will now create another folder that can be the lib. And inside the lib folder, we'll be creating a new file that can be the data.ts file, which will be handling the data part over here. So here we'll be using the in-memory data, which means when we just restart the server, so when we save any file again, when we restart the server, so the data would be lost. So again and again, we need to create every other new data after saving something or after restarting the server. So let's just move on. Let's just create the data. So we can have the let, we can have the post. So that should be an empty array. So we'll be having some post inside the CRUD API. So what do we want to do as the next step? So here we have the post, And inside that, we need to declare the type as well. So we can have the type, and that should be, we can have the post, and that should be equals to, inside that what we can do. So we can have the ID. So that should be the string. We can have the title. So that should again be the string. We can have the description as well. So that should be the string once again. So that should be the title. And after that, we want to accept the date as well if you want to get that. So we can get over the date. So that should be type of the date. So here you can see now we have the type of the post over here. And now what we can do, so we can annotate the type as well for the post. So we can have the post over here. That should be the post array. And now we want to have some functions as well for querying the database and for manipulating the data. So for that, now what do we want to do? So we can have the export const, we can have the get post. So we can have the get post like this. So get posts, and that should be equals to a function. And inside that, now what we'll be doing, so we'll be returning the post that we have inside this variable. And here we can have the handler functions like that. So we can have the handlers, so which will handle the data request over here. We have the get post. So inside that, we have the post array over here. And now if you want to insert a record, then what we can do, so we can have the add post inside that, and inside the add post, we can accept the parameter as the post, and the type should be the post itself. And inside that, now what we can do, so we can have the main post object. We have the main post database dot, we can have the push, and then we can push here the post. So that's how it will work inside the add post. And now let's move on. We can have the delete as well, or we can have the update as well. So let's just work on the delete. So we can have the delete post like this, and inside the delete, now what we'll be doing, so inside the delete, we only be needing the ID. So we can have the ID. So that should be of type of the string. And now inside that, now what do we want to do? So we can have the posts over here. So that should be equals to, we can have the post, the whole array of the post dot filter. So we'll be filtering the post over here. So inside the filter, we can have the callback in which we can have the post, and that should be equals to, we can have the post dot ID not equals to this ID that we are getting, and then it will return a new copy of that array, and then we are storing that array to the original post database. So now we have the delete, we can have the update as well. So we can just copy that over here. We can have the update post over here. So we can have the update, that should be the post, and inside that, what we can do, so inside the update, we need the data as well. We need the ID, we need the title as well. We need the title, that should be the string. We need the description as well. Again, that should be the string. And inside that, now what do we want to do? So first we want to grab that post from its ID. So we can have the post, that should be, we can have the posts array. So we can have the find, and finding from its ID. So that should be the find. And inside the find, we can have the post over here. We can have the post dot ID. So that should be this ID. So we can find a post. And then if we find that post, now what we'll be doing, so if we find that post, then we can just move on, and then we can have the post dot, we can have the title. So that should be the title that we are receiving, and post dot description like this. We can have the post dot description. So that should be the description that we are getting. So that would be all this thing. And if we don't have the post, then what we can do, so we can just throw a new error. We can just throw a new error like no post, we can have the found. So we can have this message over here. And after that, now what do we want to do? The next step. So here you can see we are complete with the get, we are complete with the add, delete, update, and finally we want to get a post by its ID. So for that, now what we can do, so again we can have the export const here. We have the export const. So that should be equals to, we can have here the like get by ID. Get by ID. So that should be equals to a function over here in which we'll be accepting the ID from the parameters. So we can have the ID at this string. And now inside that, now what do we want to do? So we can just return here, we can just return the posts, or we can have the find. We can find a post by its ID. The post, so we can have the post dot, we can have the ID. So that should be equals to the ID. So you can see now our database part has been completed. So it's not a real database, it's a dummy database, but still we have something to store. So you can see we have the post, which is a variable, which will only be available in the memory. And then we have the get post, we have the add post, we have the delete, update, and everything seems to be working perfectly fine. And now let's just move on and let's just start building the REST API, the CRUD API for our application. So now we want to move on into the blocks. So here you can see now we are just having the get request. Now instead of this, now we can have the try catch block over here. So inside the catch, if we get an error, then what we can do? So we can just return the response. And for returning the response, we have another method inside the Next.js, which is used to send the additional response, which is the next response. We have the next response, which is available from the next server, which is used to send the extended response. Like you can send the JSON over here, and in the JSON you can send the message over here, like you can get the error. And then if you want to send here the error as well, so you can send the error over here like this. So you can have the error. And now inside the second parameter of the JSON, then you can just send here an object as well, which will be having the data. So inside the object, inside the second parameter, you can send the status as well. So the status of the request, so status can be the 500 because you are getting some error inside the database operation. So the status can be 500. So that's how it will work. I think we won't need the error over here. Now inside the try, now what do we want to do? So we can have the const, we can have the post. So that should be equals to, we can have the get all post from there. So we can have the get, I think we have the post over here, we have the get post. So it will just get all of the posts from our database. And then what we can do, so we can have the return over here, we can have the response dot, we can again use the next response over here, we can have the next response dot JSON, we can have the message. So that should be the okay. Then we can send the posts as well, we can send the post, and inside the second parameter again we can send the status. So that should be 200. So that's how it will work. So if we just move on, if we just make that request over here inside the API/blocks, that should be the get request. So here you can see, if we just click on the send, now we are seeing the message as the okay. Then we are seeing the post area as well. So you can see everything seems to be working perfectly fine because now we don't have any record inside the post. And now let's just move on and let's just work on the post method as well, the post HTTP method. So inside the post, we need some data as well from the body. So inside the post request, we need some data from the body. So we can send some data from this body, raw, and the JSON. So we need to accept the JSON data. So for that, we get the JSON data from the request.json. So inside this, if you want to accept the title and the description, so we can have the const, we can have something. So something that should be equals to, we can have the request dot, we can have the JSON. And this is a promise. So we need to await for this task as well. So await the request.json, and whatever data that we send from here, like suppose if we send the title over here, so that should be, we can give the title. So that should be my new post over here. And we can send here a description as well, description. We can send the sample. So with that, if we just make the request for the title and the description, so we need to accept that over here. We can have the title, we can have the description over here, we can have the title and the description. And after that, again, we can use the try catch here. We have the try catch, and again inside the catch, we can just copy that catch over here, and then we can just paste that here. We have the try and the catch, and inside the try, now what do we want to do? So here we can have the const, we can have the post. So that should be equals to an object. So we'll create a brand new object of the post with the title. So with the title, with the description, and with the date as well. So the date can be, we can again use the new date. We can have the new date from the JavaScript, the date constructor, and finally we can have the ID as well. So that should be again with a unique ID. So as of now, we'll be using the date dot now dot, we can have the toString, which will give you a number of the current timestamp. So with that, now you can see now the post has been created. And now let's just move on and let's just insert that into the database. So we can have the add post over there, the add post and the exact post that we have just created. And after all of that, after the add post has been successful, then we can move on. We can just return the response. So we can return this response, and with that post over here, so we can have the post and status can be 201, which is created. So if we save it, if we move on to the application, if we just make a post request over here, then you can see if we just click on send, then you can see now we are seeing the post over here as the my new post, and everything seems to be working perfectly fine over here. We can have my new post, we can have the my second post as well. We can click on send. So you can see now we have two posts over here. And if we just make a get request once again, if we just click on the send, so here you can see now we have two posts over here. We have the title of the my new post, we have the my second post. So everything seems to be working perfectly fine. So you can see now the get and the post API function is working completely fine. So you can see that's all for the static route. We have the get and then we have the post. And now the next available functions for the CRUD operation can be the update, delete, and getting by its ID. So for that, again, we want to move on to the dynamic route because we want to get the ID as well. Now for getting the ID, now here, what do we want to do? So here we want to get the URL. For getting the URL, now what do we want to do? So we can have the const, we can have the ID. So that should be, we can have the request, or we can have the URL, and then we can just get the URL. As of now, we can just log that over here. We can have the ID as well. So if we just save and if we move on to the application once again, if we have the blocks, if we have any ID after that, after this, if we just click on the get, then you can see now we are seeing the exact URL, which is the localhost 3000 API block this ID. And after that, now what can we do? We can just split that over here. We can use the split method from the array, and instead the split, we can split everything with the blocks. So we can just split this part over here, the blocks over here, and then what we can do, so we can grab the first element from there. I think the development server has been closed, so we can just get the first parameter from there. So with the help of that, we'll be getting that ID. And after we get that ID, then we can move on. We can have the const, we can have the post, that should be equals to, we can have the get by ID, get post by its ID, and then we can pass that ID over here. And then we can just check a validation, like if we don't have the post, then we can just move on. And if we have the post, then we can have the return statement, that should be equals to, we can have the next, again we can have the next response dot, we can have the JSON over here, in which we can have the message over here like this. We can have the message, that can be the OK, and then we can send the exact post as well that we currently have. We can send the status as well, that should be the 200. So that's how it will work. And if we don't have the post, then what we'll be doing, so we can just move on. We can have the JSON, that should be message, we can have the error. We don't need to send the post because we don't have any. We can send the status of 404. So that's how it will work. And we don't have the try catch block here, so we want to implement that as well. So we can have the try catch over here, we can have the try, we can have the catch, and instead the catch, if we get an error, then we'll be sending the error. And now we want to move all of this code inside the try. We can just cut that from here, we can paste that here. And now inside the catch, if we are getting the error, then we can again send the error over here, and then we'll be sending the error like this. The status can be the 500. So if we save and if we move on to the application, so here you can see now we won't be having any data because now we restarted the server. So now we want to move on, and now we want to create a couple of more blocks. So we can have the post, we can have the my second post as well, and then we can have the my third post as well. We can have the my third post, we can click on the send. So if we make the get request, so you can see now we have some data. We have the my second post, now we have the my third post. And now let's just move on. Let's just have this ID over here. So now let's just get my second post from this ID. So we can have blocks slash this ID. And if we just click on the send, then I think we are getting the error. I think we just log that ID over here. If we just log that ID, so let's see what happens. So if we just click on the send, we are getting the exact ID. Maybe if we just move on and if we just click on the post once again, because now we are making another URL. If we just click on the post, if we just click on the send, you can see my third post has been created and my second post has also been again created. And if we just get this ID over there, we have this ID over here, we have the get request. If we just click on the send, then you can see now we are getting the exact data. So you can see with the exact ID, now we are getting that response because now we have changed the URL. So it is restarting the server because it is compiling that route over here. And if we just get the put and delete as well. So for that, we also need to create here the new data every time for the every type of request, because it is restarting the server and it is compiling the page on the demand. So let's move on. So you can say it is working perfectly fine. So get by ID is also working. Let's move on to the put as well. So for the put, again, you can see for the put, we need the data as well from the body because we need some data. So what do we want to do is the next step. So you can see we are already getting the data inside the post. We can just copy that over here. We can just paste that over here. And now we'll be having the try catch block over here as well. So we can have the try and we can have the catch over here as well. Now inside that, now what do we want to do is the next step. So first we'll be just destructuring the title and the description from the request.json. And after that, what we can do, so we can just move on, and then we need to get the ID as well. So for the ID, we have this const ID. So we can have the ID as well. And after that, now what do we want to do? So here we have a function of the update post in which we want to send the ID and we want to send the title as well, which we are getting from the request.body. We are sending the description as well. So that's how it will work. So we'll be having the update post over here. And after that, now what do we want to do is the next step. So we can just return, we can have the response dot, we can have here the JSON. So we can have the next response like this. So next response dot, again, we can have the JSON over here. And now inside that, we can again have the message over here. We can have the message that can be okay. And inside the second parameter, we can just send here the status. Again, we can have the status. that should be the 200, which is okay. And if we are getting something inside the catch block, I think we have an error over here. So JSON should be closed over here, and we need to close it from here. So that's how it will work. And now inside the catch block, now what we'll be doing? So we need to send the error. So we need to send the error. So if we save and if we move on, and if we just move on, if we just make that request for the put, so let's just compile that put page. So you can see we have the error. And now let's just move on and let's just create the post request once again. So we can have the post request of the my second post. So let's create that post, and that can be my third post like this. So we have this post over here. And now let's see that if we have the post, if we just click on the send for the get request, so you can see now we have two posts over here. And if we just click on the put, we have this ID. Like if we want to change the my third post, then we can have the my third post. We can have the my last post. If we just click on the send, so now it should be deleted. So if we move on to the get request once again, so you can see now we only have the my last post over here. You can see everything seems to be working perfectly fine because now we have changed this over here. You can see now the update is also working perfectly fine. Now the final part would be the delete. And after the delete, now I think you got an idea that how to create the request handlers with the Next.js 13. So it is very easy and simple to use. So if you want to try it yourself, then you can try it as well. So now let's work on the delete as well, and let's just wrap up this video. So inside the delete, let's just compile the delete page, because for compilation, it is creating empty pages. So now it is compiled. So now let's just move on and let's just work on the delete. So again, we can have the try catch over here. We can just copy that content. We can paste that over here. And inside that, we won't be needing the title and the description. So we can remove that. And for the update post, we'll be using the delete over here. So we can have the delete post over here. And we only need to send the ID, not the title and the description. And now what do we want to do? So we have the message of the okay, we have the status of 200, and everything seems to be working perfectly fine. And if we just move on, click on the post, if we just create some post once again, that again, we can have the second post like this. We can have the my second post, and then we can have the my last post once again, my last post. If we just click on the send, and if we just move on to the get request, so you can see now we have two posts over here, my second and my last. And finally, if we just click on the delete, and if we just get this ID of the my second post, if we just paste that ID over here, if we just click on the send, so now it should be deleted. So we are seeing the message as the okay. But if we move on to the get, if we just click on this send, so you can see now we don't have that over here. And if we just get all of the blocks, so I think we are seeing the empty array over here. I don't know why, but if we just create the post request once again, so we have the post over here. So if we just create another request, like the my last post, and we can have the second post. If we just create two posts over here with the get request, and you can see it is working perfectly fine. And if we want to delete the my second post, we have this ID over here, we have this delete. And if we just click on this send, so now it should be deleted. And if we just move on to the get request to get all of the blocks, so you can see now we only have the my last post. So you can see my second post has been deleted. So we only have the my last post. So you can see everything seems to be working perfectly fine. You can see now we have completed a basic CRUD API with the Next.js 13 app router. And then you can see it was very simple and easy to understand and easy to use. So we just create the route.ts file, which is a custom handler functions. We just have the dynamic pages for the dynamic IDs. And then we have the specific functions like the get, we have the put, we have the delete. So with that step, you can see now our application has been completed. So it was very nice meeting all you guys. I think now you have the knowledge of how to create the API routes with the Next.js 13. So congratulations on completing that. So please like the video if you found this content helpful, and please comment as well if you found any error or if you want to appreciate me. So that's it for this. So let's wrap up this video.